Welcome to Talk Me Healthy. My name is Sherry Keating, founder, Diabetes Care Consulting. The goal of Talk Me Healthy is to provide you education on how to live your best life every day starting today. Each show will bring a different health-related topic and exciting guests to share their expertise, passion, and personal stories. My hope is you will hear something that motivates you to make a small step towards living a healthier, happier life. Hello and welcome to Talk Me Healthy. This is your host, Sherry Keating. Today's show is going to be filled with information that we all need to know. We're going to be talking about healthcare proxies, and I have as my guest today, Jack Whelan. Hi, Jack. How are you?
Hi, Sherry. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. Jack is actually a registered nurse, and he's a care manager, and he's the owner of, I want to make sure I get this right, Still River Senior Life Consultants.
That's right.
Awesome.
Yes. Yep.
All right, so Jack is going to fill you in on all what you need to know and the importance of having a healthcare proxy prior to needing it. So, Jack, tell me a little bit about yourself and why actually you're doing this education.
Okay, so I am an RN.
Okay.
And my experience has mostly been in hospice and home care. And I left that career path and started working for a geriatric care manager. And I learned a lot in a year and a half that I was working with her and decided to spin off and do my own business. So I started as a care manager back just in March. But I think my experience leading up to this point has made me very aware of the needs of seniors, especially in our communities, in terms of establishing goals for themselves and then needing some help and advocacy in terms of meeting their goals. So, for example, if somebody wanted to stay home for the rest of their life, there are little incremental goals along the way that they would need to meet in order to fill that goal. Mm-hmm. So I help people with that kind of thing. The major part of my work, though, is advocacy for seniors. And I want to make sure that people have what they need, that they're informed, that we can take some of the panic out of crises situations for them.
That must be so helpful for seniors and their families.
Yes, because the families, of course, are a major part of that. Mm-hmm. And so, as part of that business, I update the families continually through the process. So
you're doing great work. So where does the healthcare proxy, first of all, what is the healthcare proxy and where does it fit into those goals?
Okay, so a healthcare proxy is a form, a designee, who will make your healthcare decisions for you in the event that you can't. So I'm going to show you what the form looks like. It's a very simple form. There are a lot of different forms that are out there, and you can get them from the internet. This is the Massachusetts State Healthcare Proxy Form. Okay. I have it here. It's printed on a couple of pages, but actually it's 2 pages, front and back, and so it's a very simple form. You don't need to have a lawyer to do this. It's just filling it out, talking to your designee. There is also a space for a second designee in the event that the first person becomes incapacitated themselves or is unable to make the decisions or doesn't want to make the decisions. They choose not to at the time that a crisis occurs or that the need occurs. So everybody really needs this a healthcare proxy, I believe, because if you don't have one, I think it can cause a lot of serious problems for your medical care.
So you're saying that a healthcare proxy is actually a piece of paper. Now, if you don't need a lawyer, is it legal?
So it is a legal document, and what makes it a legal document is that your signature is on it, and so is the signature of 2 witnesses who see this. So and this form, using the Massachusetts healthcare proxy form. The best thing about it is that if you live in Massachusetts, you can be very sure that this meets the state guidelines. Okay. So, and rather than using a form that might be online from someplace else, there are a lot of these kinds of things, as I said, but this meets the state guidelines.
Okay. And so it's a legal document.
Yes.
that designates one or two people, so one primary, one alternate,
Yes.
to make decisions for you when you're unable to make decisions.
That's
is that
right.
correct?
That's absolutely right.
Okay. And so why is that important?
Well, let me just go back for 1 second, though, because I want to just point out, too, that the first designee and the second designee on the form do not have the same power. What happens is the first designee is the person that they will always go to unless that person's not available. So then the second person steps in. So it's not a back and forth thing, like if they can't reach the first person, they call the second person. So they keep looking for the first person until they absolutely have no other choice but to use the second.
Okay.
So,
all right. So that's important to know. So when you're deciding who's going to be the first person, who's going to be the alternate, how do you make that decision? That's a very big decision because you're talking about someone speaking for you when you can't. So that's a really big decision, and not one that you want to make when you're at a crisis, because there's a lot of emotions at a crisis. You want to have this all prepared ahead of time, and you want to have communicated your needs. Mm-hmm. So how do you make that decision?
So, I mean, it's a tough choice. I mean, and it is a hard decision.
Absolutely.
To get the person who's really going to advocate for you. You need to make sure that you're choosing somebody who is not going to be overwhelmed with their emotions in the time that a need arises, and that they'll be able to truly make the decisions that you would make yourself if you were able to speak for yourself.
That's really the key, I believe, is that they're making decisions you want them to make and not decisions that because we all have an opinion about what should happen at the end of life, but it's really about the person who you're the proxy for, their decisions, not yours or your thoughts.
That's right.
It's really about the person, and I think people need to understand that.
Right.
You have to be willing to carry out the other person's wishes, whether or not you agree with them or not.
That's right.
And that's the key, right?
Right. So the healthcare proxy the person who's designated should ask themselves, can I do that?
That's a good thing.
Because some people are emotional people. I have a sister, for example, who she is very close to my mother. And she is a very emotional person, and she sees my mother the most out of all of my siblings, and she has said, I might be close to Mom, but there's no way that I want to make those decisions for her, because it would be too hard for me,
right.
And it would be hard for her to separate herself out from what's actually happening with Mom and what Mom's wishes would be.
So I think that people automatically think it's their spouse if they're married or their significant other, but that's not necessarily the case.
Right, and a spouse sometimes is not the best person. The reason is that a lot of times when people do this paperwork, they're doing a lot of they're doing taking care of their business, their plans and all that. So they might be, prepaying a funeral home at that time, choosing a power of attorney, choosing a healthcare proxy, choosing all these different people, seeing the lawyer, and putting it all together at the same time, right? So they might be doing that when they're in their 40s or 50s or whatever. And then they reach their 80s and 90s, and one predeceases the other. So, and they haven't gone back and changed that. So what do you do if your spouse passes away,
right.
and that's the person who you chose, right? So that's one issue with it. And what I would say is that there's nothing wrong with choosing a spouse, but I would choose an alternate, the second person, who's the designee, as somebody who's younger. So, and then the other part of this is, you talked about spouse, but that leads me into family members. Should your healthcare proxy be a family member? Does it have to be a family member? The answer is no. What you need to do is choose somebody who can represent you and who will make the decisions the same way as you would yourself, right? What we said earlier. Yeah. But so who might you choose? Who's going to be that person if it's not a family member?
And it's your individual decision. Like for me, I chose my husband, but he does not have a medical background. So my alternate is my brother, who's a cardiologist, and he has the medical background. But I know my brother will consult, my husband will consult with my brother before making decisions. So they can work together, right? Is that okay?
So ideally, what we would love to happen is if, say the healthcare proxy was one of your children. What we would love to happen is for that child to go to the rest of the family and say, we have this decision to make, and make it as a group and hopefully reach consensus. And sometimes there are medical staff and social workers in different facilities that can help you to have that conversation if it's difficult in an emergency situation or when emotions are riding high. So they can help to have the conversation. If the family is divided, I have clients who their children don't get along at all. And there's this big rift, there's a big division. Sometimes what happens is my clients will choose me as their healthcare proxy because I know their medical history. I'm taking them for appointments, I see their doctors, I'm updating the family so the family's all on the same page. I'm an unbiased outsider who doesn't get involved in the family dynamics. So that
you're a neutral party.
So I'm the neutral party. Yep, I'm Switzerland in this. So
do you feel comfortable with having somebody choose you as their proxy?
Absolutely. I would say probably about a third of my clients do. Yeah.
Okay.
So so I think, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that that I think that an outsider like a really close friend can also be a really good healthcare proxy. You're a nurse, I'm a nurse. We could choose a fellow nurse as our healthcare proxy if we want somebody who knows the medical piece of things. But, it doesn't have to be a medical person. It just has to be somebody that you've had conversations with who know what your wishes are. That's really the main thing. It doesn't have to be a medical person. You don't need any of that. You really need to just have somebody that you can have these conversations with.
So I have a healthcare proxy, and I'm sure you do too. And what happens if I decide differently about what I want, and what if I decide that the person that I've appointed as either the primary or the alternative, I change my mind? So once I make a proxy and I've told them my wishes, but now my wishes have changed and I've decided that, maybe I would need to change to a different person. Am I legally bound to that one proxy that I made out originally, or can I change my mind?
You can absolutely change your mind. And the way that that's done is by completing a new form.
Okay.
It's as simple as that. And, the forms are dated. If there are more than one form out there with your name and information on it, what's going to be used is the one with the most recent date. Okay, so the dating, it's really important, and making sure that this is what your designee is. And then the second part of that is that if you change your mind, or if again, if someone dies, if you're the person you've chosen has passed away, it's really important to stay up to date and to choose somebody else. Okay. And there's one other thing I wanted to talk about too, and that's what happens in the event of a divorce.
Oh, okay.
So if you get divorced and you've chosen your spouse as your healthcare proxy, automatically with the divorce finalization, the healthcare proxy that exists ends.
Really?
Yes. So you need to choose. So you need to choose a new healthcare proxy.
Oh, okay.
So yes, it's no longer valid with a divorce.
Good information.
So, but the other thing is that sometimes there are these amicable divorces, and in my hospice work I encountered many times where an ex-spouse was the healthcare proxy for someone, but what they had to do was, after the divorce, complete a new form that made it clear that we want to continue this agreement. Okay. So it's dated with a date after the divorce, and that would validate it.
Now, two questions came to mind as you're talking, all of these questions, so I'm sure the viewers have a lot of questions too. So the two questions is, you said they have to be witnessed by two people. Now, it doesn't have to be notarized, it just needs to be, so what are those two people that are signing as your witness actually witnessing?
Okay, so all that they're witnessing is your signature.
Okay, so watching you actually sign it. So if you're a good sound mind that you are actually signing this for yourself.
That's right.
And does the primary and the alternative also have to sign, or is that an option?
No. In fact, it's really interesting how this works, because you would think if you're choosing someone as your healthcare proxy that they would need to sign too.
Yes.
But they don't. And the reason is because if you described earlier what happens when you go in the hospital and you don't have a healthcare proxy. The hospital staff, the social worker comes in, they make you sign one, and it's an urgent situation, right? So hopefully you're able to sign and you're able to appoint somebody to do that at that point. And then what happens is a phone call would be made saying, are you willing to be this person's designated healthcare proxy? But you don't have to be present. So that person, so say you have a child in Arizona and you live in Massachusetts, they can call that person on the phone and say, are you willing to do it? Ideally, you want the healthcare proxy to sign, and there is a place for them to sign, but it's not required.
Does the proxy have to be present when it comes time? First of all, when does it go into effect? And when it does go into effect, does that person, because this may make someone's decision about whether they want to do this or not, do they have to be present, when a person needs them? Or can they just, like you said, be reached at the phone call to talk to them about what this person wants?
So that's a two-part question, and each of them has a separate explanation. So the first part is, when does it go into effect, right? So the healthcare proxy goes into effect when a doctor signs an order that says the person, the patient, is no longer able to make their own decisions. They're incompetent to make their own decisions, okay? That's a really, really important thing, because what I see all the time is family members going in and believing that because someone is in the hospital and is in a weakened state, that automatically this person who's the designee on the healthcare proxy form has the authority to start making decisions for them, and they don't.
Okay.
It's only when the doctor signs that order. So the second piece of it was,
does the person, when it goes into effect and it comes time to make those decisions, do they need to be physically present, or is a phone call sufficient?
A phone call is sufficient, but I would again recommend that in choosing the healthcare proxy, that you choose someone who can get there fairly quickly, or who's willing to get there. I am a healthcare proxy for my mother, and she lives about 5 hours away. So what will happen in the event that she gets very sick or something is that they'll call me. I'll probably be hopping in the car and driving down there. But for those 5 hours while I'm not there, we can stay in touch on the phone. Okay. And there are certain questions that I would ask. If I'm not right there, I would want to know what happened, what are they finding, do they have a treatment plan in mind, what medications are they treating her with, and what might happen that I might need to make some decisions on. I would ask those questions.
So what would we do without our cell phones today?
I know.
I mean, really, it connects us with everything, doesn't it?
It's absolutely true.
Unbelievable.
Yep.
So I've made out my proxy. Where am I going to keep this proxy? Who am I going to give it to? I'm assuming you're going to give it to your proxy, the person who's going to make decisions, your alternative. But do I need to give it to a lawyer because it's a legal piece of paper, even though they don't have to be present when this is being signed and made? Do I need to give it to my doctor? Who do I give it to? And what do I do with that?
That is a really great question, because what I've heard of is people who do the paperwork that we talked about earlier, all in a lump. They're choosing all this stuff. They're getting their estate in order, a lot of that stuff just goes into the safety deposit box.
Right.
Right? So and what good is a healthcare proxy there? Who's going to know where it is, and how is the hospital supposed to get their hands on it? And does anybody know that it's even in there?
My husband has mine in his glove compartment of his car.
That's exactly what I recommend.
Oh, really?
Yes. Keep a copy of the healthcare, if you're the designee, keep a copy of the healthcare proxy in the glove compartment of your car, because chances are if you get that phone call and you're going to rush off to the hospital and it's an urgent situation, your head is not going to be wrapped around getting that healthcare proxy out of your house wherever you're keeping it and bring it with you. If you have, it's only this one paper here, if you have it with you, you're going to have it when you need it, and you can bring it into the hospital and hand it to the doctor. So that's the best place for it.
Okay.
I would also recommend that you give it to your doctor for sure. That you maybe keep a copy in your own glove compartment, and that you give it to family members.
Okay.
You know, I mean, you can give this to whoever you think might need it. It's not so intensely private that because it is designating a name.
Right.
But I think the most important thing is that people know who you've chosen, because you want the conversation to happen where everybody's on board in your care, if that's possible. So pulling it together and making sure that people know who you've chosen before everything happens is probably a really good idea to keep the conversation where it needs to be.
Does the hospital have a copy?
The hospital depends on, so the hospitals have networks, and they share information with doctors. A lot of times, doctors that are affiliated with the hospital, so they can kind of go back and forth and know what your records are. But not every hospital does it. Not every doctor is tapped in. And so if your doctor has your healthcare proxy, sometimes the hospital has it, sometimes they don't have access to it.
Okay.
So you really need to have it with you.
Okay. And then say I'm a snowbird. I'm going to go down and leave Massachusetts, but I have a Massachusetts proxy form filled out. Something happens to me when I'm in Florida for the winter. So what is the Massachusetts proxy null and void? Does Florida have their own? Do I need to complete one? How does that work?
So every state has their own. And what I would say is, I haven't heard of any cases where the healthcare proxy from another state hasn't been honored.
Okay.
But, I researched this question because I was thinking about it for my own clients. What do we need to do? So, what I've always seen is, quote unquote, in most cases, the healthcare proxy is honored. So somewhere, somebody must not have honored it to say in most cases. There's always, you could always do, if you're in a state, if you're in Florida for 6 months of the year,
just do one there.
Yeah, you could do one there. So, yeah.
Okay. So what if I don't have a healthcare proxy and it comes to that time where I am no longer able to make decisions? I don't have a proxy. I don't have anybody that I've designated. What's going to happen? Who's going to make those decisions for me?
That's a great question. And this is why it's so important to have one. So it all becomes, something that's based on hope at that time that the right people will be there and that they'll ask the right questions. And what I mean by that is that if you have, some people don't have family, but if you have family, chances are that if you're in an urgent situation again, that family will be gathered, and that the doctors will go to the family and say, what would you like to happen? And hopefully they can agree on a decision.
That's the key. Hopefully they can agree, because I know just from my own experience as a nurse and my own family members, because my father recently passed away, we all have a different opinion.
Right. Everybody can have the best intentions at heart.
Right, exactly. So that decision, this is why it is so important to have all of that taken care of prior to the actual crisis, because then it's very difficult and you've got all of those family dynamics, and, it's hard to make a decision and come to one decision as a group.
And that's only one reason why you need a healthcare proxy. The other one is that, let's see. So what if the person who's making the decisions for you kind of agonizes over whether it's the right decision for you, whether it's happens. What you would want. Would mom want treatment that would keep her alive for as long as possible, or would mom want to be made comfortable at a certain point, and the treatment options would be for around comfort? So that would be, those are hard questions. Like, what if mom had a stroke and it looked like she was never going to be able to use her arms or her legs again, and so she couldn't feed herself, that she would be incontinent, that she would be wheelchair bound, and need to be moved, turned, all that stuff, so her skin didn't break down. Those kinds of things could happen. And then would she want that? Would she want to stay alive? Some people would say yes, and some people would say no. So you make the decision that you think they would want, but then, say they pass away. You're living with that decision, second guessing, feeling guilty.
Right.
So by having a healthcare proxy, you're saving your family from that kind of a complicated grief, really.
Exactly. Because mom is telling you exactly what she wants, and you're really abiding by her wishes, and that's really the bottom line.
Right.
And then there's no what if and feeling bad because you don't want to lose your mom, so you want to keep her alive, but then is that the best thing for her? And then it just goes back and forth, and you're tortured emotionally.
Right.
And then you, like you say, after she passes, oh, did I make the right decision? So I think it's so important, and the information that you've shared is so important. And you know what? Our half hour has already gone by.
Oh my
goodness! I can't even believe it. So
do we have a minute so I could just
absolutely
show a couple of handouts that I recommend?
Please,
okay.
And resources and some key messages that we can leave with our viewers would be great.
Sure. So the first thing is this little booklet, which is long. I printed it out, but usually I download it and read it online. It's free. And so this one tells you what would you want if you were in a coma? What would you want if you had a stroke? What would you want if you had dementia?
That's
and
great.
It really helps to ask the questions so that you and your healthcare proxies can imagine what the scenarios could potentially be, and they know what you might want.
Okay, that's great. All
so
right.
That's one. This one is by a group that is all about having difficult conversations about end-of-life care. This is called the Conversation Starter, and it's a kit that tells you, what kinds of things you should do to prepare yourself. If you're a person who's nervous, or you don't feel like, or you feel like your family members or whoever you might designate as your healthcare proxy is very emotional, you may want to do this, go through this and find a comfortable situation. It gives you guidelines about how you might have that conversation. And this one is from the same organization, How to Choose a Healthcare Proxy and How to Be a Healthcare Proxy.
That's awesome. Those are great resources, Jack. Thank you so much. And we will have the links to those resources. So in closing, tell me what you think the key messages about healthcare proxies would be to our viewers.
Okay, so the first thing is that everyone needs a healthcare proxy, and it's a very simple form to fill out.
All right.
And the second thing I think would be that you need to choose your healthcare proxy carefully. Choose somebody who would make the decisions as if you were making them yourself.
Perfect.
Right? And then the third thing would probably be about keeping that form with you, having it available, and making sure that when you're in a situation that you have it there.
Excellent. So you all heard those messages. So go and get a healthcare proxy, download it, and fill it out and have those difficult conversations, because you want to have them now versus later, so that your wishes will be honored when the time comes. So thank you so much, Jack.
Thank you, Sherry.
Appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for the great information. And to the viewers, thank you so much for tuning in again to Talk Me Healthy. And tune back in next month when we will be having a show on mental massage. It's going to be a great show. And until then, remember to live your best life every day starting today. This is Sherry Keating. Thank you.